Hey Phil, this is Cameron.
Hey, what's up, Cam?
Man, I gotta talk to you about something. Have you been watching the news?
Dude, what is going on? Pocket politics with Phil and Cam. Why? Why are we doing this?
I think it's gonna matter.
The only thing they want to talk about is guns and abortion.
My own views, I want to see the Republicans get away from the social issues.
I'm not saying that Republicans are idiots.
You hear something like that, it's powerful.
As an American, I was disgusted.
You could make the argument that you're probably more in the middle as well.
I think that's just a story that somebody's telling you.
Again, well, with the facts, this is true. Everybody knows
What
it.
facts?
So-
What facts? Who does this hurt more, Republicans or Democrats?
Boy, I've been thinking about that.
Welcome back to Pocket Politics. Cameron, Happy New Year. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy New Year to you also. Ready to get back in the swing of things here. There's plenty of things to swing on tonight. So
Absolutely, and also Happy New Year to all of our listeners. So hopefully it is treating them well so far. I don't think we have anybody listening that is in the House of Representatives at the moment, but everybody else, hopefully they're doing good. This episode, we've got a bunch of news, some of it a little bit older because we took that 2-week break, but we're going to dig into the Trump taxes. We've got a brand new congressman, actually we have a lot of them, but George Santos in particular we wanted to mention. He's been in the news for the past couple of weeks. We've got some action with the president, Biden policies going into effect, and a bipartisan meeting at a bridge in Kentucky and Ohio. We've also got some news about Josh Hawley, potential candidate running against him, and a retiring senator from Michigan, Debbie Stabenow. And then we will move on to probably the biggest news of the last week, which is the chaos in the U.S. House of Representatives. Cam, what do you think?
I think it's plenty to talk about here. So I think we should get started with the Trump tax returns. Phil, what do you got on those?
Well, real quick, I did want to say we did get a very nice New Year's message. Did you have a chance to see that?
I did not.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read it for our listeners too. It says, "Happy New Year to all the radical left Democrats, Marxist lunatics, China-loving Coco Chow and her obedient husband Mitch, and clueless rhinos who are working so hard to destroy our once great country. More importantly, Happy New Year to the incredible, brave, and strong American patriots who built, love, and cherish America. The real leaders of our country will always remain faithful and loyal to you. The USA will be back, bigger and better and stronger than ever before. God bless you all."
Was that the
So
the Trump New Year's message?
That was the Trump New Year's message, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, great. Okay. Well, there you go. Perfect lead in for the taxes, Phil. Now that you've got his New Year's cheer out of the way, why don't you tell us about the taxes?
Yeah, so we had a chance to break it down. I'm not going to get into too much good detail because I don't think, you and I aren't accountants and neither are a lot of our listeners, I'm assuming. But, it looks like Trump paid little or no taxes multiple years. There were 2 years in a row that he paid $750 only. The gravity of that, I don't think surprises a lot of people, and I think the people that it would surprise just don't care anyway. What do you think?
Yeah, probably. I mean, that's probably about right. I mean, 6 years worth of returns is what was issued or what's been released to the public already. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I was reading through some of the notes about it. Mixed feelings, of course, on whether they should be released, what was in them, that kind of stuff. As usual, I mean, with Trump, you're going to get mixed feelings, and some of that depends on what side of the political aisle they sit on. I mean, you have people like Ryan Ellis from the National Review who said, and I quote, "Nothing in the returns we didn't already know," end quote. So I think you're right. Some people just don't care.
I knew he was a tax cheat and probably, didn't pay that much taxes, or at least what he claimed. I mean, we know that, he said that he was going to donate his salary to charity or back to the government. I think he had made claims of both at different times, and he clearly didn't do that. It's not evidenced in his tax returns. He paid zero taxes, in the year 2020, which he was the president of the United States. And then I think there's some other things in there that we didn't know, right? Like I had no idea that there were several years out of those 6 that he paid more taxes to foreign governments than he did to the U.S. government, right? I don't think any of us knew that he had a Chinese bank account until 2018. Could you imagine? And this is why I think it's a lot of projection, right? He's accusing all these people of cozying up to China at the same time he's got a bank account there and potential business ventures, you know?
I mean, he had business ventures with not only China, India, Mexico,
Russia.
Philippines was another one I saw. I mean, there's all kinds of foreign ones. I mean, I agree with you with that. I don't think we knew to the extent of what he was doing foreign business operations with. The taxes show us more of that.
And it also goes to show us, too, that Trump kind of needed the presidency just so he could earn money. You can see all these sources of income coming in once he's the president, but prior to that, they just didn't exist, and he was losing money. You know, at least if his taxes are truthful, it shows that he lost a significant amount of money prior to becoming the president.
I mean, he's got money-making ventures now. He's selling NFTs for $99 each, where you can buy them and see him looking like a cowboy.
Which, by the way, I heard 2 other things about that, which is kind of funny, is that you know that if you bought one of those NFTs, you only own a third of the actual NFT, right? So in order to sell the amount that he had with the amount of NFTs that he actually created, you buy one of those, you're only getting a third of it. Because they were only able to make so many unique ones, or whatever the case is, the reason they were limited. But you're not even getting the full NFT, and the market has dropped out of the bottom on these things anyway, so they're almost worth nothing at this point.
So you're saying the Trump fighter pilot NFT is worth almost nothing. Great.
As is the Trump cowboy, character from Yellowstone, or whatever you want to call it, with the long trench coat and.
Did you ever hear how many different NFTs there were? I mean, I know the fighter pilot and the cowboy or Yellowstone character or whatever, but like, isn't there an astronaut one or something also? Or
I don't know. There's several. I don't even care how many there are. It's just so absurd. But I think the bottom line is like I said, a lot of it's just projection, right? This guy is everything that he does that we find out that he does after the fact. He's accusing people of doing prior to us finding out that he actually did them. It's like cozying up to China. He talks about Coco Chow and her husband Mitch, in the New Year's message. And it turns out he had Chinese bank accounts and Chinese business ventures this whole time. So it's all projection. The guy's a fraud and a cheat. A lot of us knew that before. The people who don't seem to care or just his sycophants and supporters aren't going to care anymore about it. So what news it is, other than it may get him in more legal trouble than he's already in, possibly, I don't know. I mean, but I just don't. It's newsworthy because it's something that everybody's been talking about, but I don't know that it makes that much of a difference either way.
I'm with you. I mean, I think it's a news story. It was out there. I haven't heard as much about it lately because, of course, there's other stuff in the news now. But, I mean, you talk about his message, New Year's message to McConnell and his wife and such. I mean, we'll talk about Mitch and such later. Former president can say what he wants about McConnell. We've got some other news to talk about him that I'll save it for, but I think McConnell is kind of just ignoring the guy as far as I know. Don't you think, Phil?
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's not even going to respond to anything, and good on him, right? He's staying out of the fight. Because it's not a fight worth having, right? It doesn't benefit him in any way. It's just that, to get into a ranting or a Twitter war, or a true social war, whatever you want to call it, with the former president, doesn't benefit anybody but the former president. But speaking of things in the news and frauds and lies and projection, we've got this guy from New York, Cam, George Santos, who is now, as we're recording this, he has now been sworn in as a member of the House of Representatives. He was on camera last night, sitting through the proceedings, the shit show all week in the House. But it looks like he is going to be a member of Congress, despite the fact that nobody really knows what this guy has done his whole life except for the Brazilian government.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, he's got all these claims out there, fictitious claims or whatever, about his ancestry, education, employment. I mean, charity work, property ownership, even crimes that he's saying are committed against him. He's got all kinds of stuff out there now. And yeah, I mean, there is a ton. And there's so much to dig through there that, I mean, we don't have the time to sit here and talk about every one of his claims or whatever, but there are a ton of them out there.
I mean, you say claims. I'm just saying, he said he was Jewish. He's not Jewish. He lied, right? He said his grandparents fled the Holocaust. He lied. He said that he was a property manager. He lied. He, in fact, not only was not a property manager, he had been evicted several times. He said that his mom died in 9/11. She didn't. She died in 2016. He said he went to Baruch College. Turns out he never went to any college. I mean, everything he's done, his job resume.
Yeah, no, I got it. Claims, lies, whatever. I'm with you, right? This guy has pretty much fabricated his whole background. And so, as such, you're right. He has now been sworn in, but not without controversy. And I will tell you, there's been a number of Republicans that haven't said anything about this guy. There's been a number that have also. I've been reading, there's quite a few Republicans and certainly Democrats have said this guy needs to step down. Calls to resign are coming from all over, to include the Republican Jewish coalition. I mean, you mentioned earlier when he talked about his grandparents being Jewish or whatever, Holocaust survivors, I think he'd said or whatever. Well, the Republican Jewish coalition is not happy about that. They are saying he needs to step down. Several of their prominent members are saying it. Phil, how long do you think this guy lasts in the Congress?
I think there's no Republican accountability anymore. I think there's zero accountability. I think he's going to spend his full 2 years, and it's going to have to come down to the voters.
I disagree. I think this guy's out of there soon. And I say that because I've actually been reading that they think it's only a matter of time before this guy's out of there. So I think within a couple of months, maybe even we'll see George Santos out of there. I think there's too much pressure. I mean, I'll be honest with you, right? Politics can be a dirty game. And you know what? Kevin McCarthy got what he needed out of him with a speaker vote. I think now they're all ready to cast him aside. I mean, I watched him as you mentioned earlier, right? The cameras have been on him this week. I mean, no one is talking to this guy in the House. He's pretty much sitting there by himself, or he might be sitting next to people, but people are basically ignoring him. I just think there's too much baggage and he's too young. It's not like this guy's been around for 30 years and holds any connections. I think he's gone. I think he's gone relatively quick. And I will tell you what I'm reading. There's already preps for a special election in New York. Democrats are very excited. They've got a number of candidates they want to throw out there. And there's even some whisperings of Republicans have found a backup if they need to run off in a special election. Phil, I don't think he's going to be around that long. This guy's got way too much baggage. Like you said earlier, almost nothing about his past that he claimed, to have been in there in his bios and all that stuff. Almost none of that stuff was true. So, yeah, I don't think he lasts. I think there'll be a special election up there in New York sooner rather than later for this guy or for this guy's seat.
Yeah, and like I said, there is no Republican accountability, especially in the House. I mean, look, they punish somebody more for trying to go after Trump after January 6th than they did for going to white supremacist rallies. They punished Liz Cheney more than they punished Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's a fact, right? They punished Liz Cheney more than they punished Matt Gaetz, even though he was under investigation for being a sex trafficker, trafficking underage women. There's no accountability in the Republican Party.
They're going after this guy. I don't think he sticks around.
If Democrats in New York get a special election, that's the voters holding him accountable. The Republican House is not going to hold him accountable.
Yeah, well, I disagree. I think he's going to be.
I mean, if
based on what I'm reading, there's a number of Republicans speaking out saying get out of there. So I think he's
who is speaking out. I mean, other than him getting dunked on Fox News when he went on an interview on the Tucker Carlson show, I haven't seen any Republicans speaking out about him.
Norm.
I mean, you mentioned that
Norm Coleman is one of them, and there's several others that have been. So,
all right. Well, speaking of fallout from this whole thing, it turns out we learn earlier this week that now that Brazil knows where he is, they reopened the investigation into his apparent fraud of a kind of an elderly care facility that his mother had worked at. It turns out he was defrauding of people of money down in Brazil. And so they are furthering their investigation into him. And additionally, this Representative Richie Torres put up some legislation the other day called the Stop Another Non-Truthful Office Seeker Act,
Yeah, the
which
Santos
stands for
Act.
Santos.
Yeah, the Santos
Which
Act.
you kind of gotta love the fact that they've been doing this. I mean, I don't know of older examples, but I know that the Covfefe Act back in 2017 that was put up, where Covfefe was one of Trump's errant tweets and was also an acronym for what they actually did. Do you think it goes anywhere?
The Santos Act. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I, I I saw it was put out there. I mean, I actually well, no, I mean, I like to think that bills like that actually do garner interest, because I would like to think that elected representatives do care about what people are saying about their past. And like I said, I mean, from what
Wouldn't you
I'm
just
reading,
like to? Wouldn't you just like to think that elected representatives are held to the same standards as somebody who works at a McDonald's?
you'd like to think, but like I said, I think at the end of the day, Santos is going to be gone, and I'll be surprised if he makes it more than 2 to 3 months. I think he'll be
Yeah,
out of
I,
there.
I mean, I think he's going to last no longer than 2 years, but I will tell you, I don't think it's going to be because of accountability on the Republicans' behalf.
Well,
They have
I
shown
mean,
no ability to hold people accountable for various things in the past, and granted, it's not all them. I mean, there's cases of this on the Democratic side, but I mean, the fact that the Democrats forced Al Franken to step down, but they can't force Matt Gaetz or Marjorie Taylor Greene, who have actually committed, Matt Gaetz probably committed a crime, but even again, Al
he
Franken
hasn't
just
been
shows you don't
charged
have
though.
to be true, but Al Franken wasn't ever charged with a crime. The girl in California who was ousted after she got a divorce and had sex with a staffer, she didn't commit a crime.
I think again we can go round and round on this, but I'm going to stand with it. Santos will be gone at the end of the day. He's going to be gone. Republicans don't want to keep this guy around. And you know what? Even if it goes to a special election, the Democrats somehow flip it back. Republicans still got the slim majority in the House, even if they lost this seat. And I'll be honest with you. I don't know if the Republicans need to be that worried about the seat. I mean, if it goes to a special election, they did very well in New York. There, several moderate candidates of theirs did very well, and that's a big reason they've got the House. So I think they would even stand a shot in a special election at winning. I mean, especially in Long Island. I mean, there seemed to be a lot of resistance against the Democrats in districts there. Like I said, Long Island being one of them in New York. That I think the Republicans can take that seat back, even if it comes to a special election. So, like I said, Phil, I mean, we could spin our wheels and go round and round on this one. I mean, you and I maybe disagree a little bit on the accountability piece or whatever, but at the end of the day, I think he's gone. Made for a lot of headlines, but you know what? There'll be a new headline next week.
Yeah, but who knows? It may include him.
It
Moving on,
probably
we've
will
got
it probably will at the rate we're going.
yeah. Moving on, we've got a fairly historic meeting at the Brent Spence Bridge in Kentucky and Ohio, right there on the border. Kind of a big deal, Cam. What do you think?
Well, I actually thought that was a good meeting. It was, kind of for our listeners, maybe they didn't catch it because there was so much other drama going on in the news, which was unfortunate. Maybe this got overlooked, but yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Brent Spence Bridge there in Kentucky. I mean, that connects, for our listeners, just so they know, that connects Covington, Kentucky with Cincinnati, Ohio, basically, right? Bridge that's been very much
Yeah,
overused, or I shouldn't say overused, but just there's just too much traffic going through it for that bridge to even keep up. And there's been safety concerns about it. So you had bipartisan work to try and get something done here, right? And to a greater extent, right, this is a reflection of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. But in this particular day, we did see bipartisanship at its finest, if you will. Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio, Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky. Beshear being a Democrat, DeWine being a Republican. But they both had talked about how they had been working together to try and get something done. And then we saw the senators there. Rob Portman out of Ohio, who's actually, I guess, retired now, but a Republican who'd worked on this for a number of years. Sherrod Brown out of Ohio, Democrat, right? They were working together. Mitch McConnell is there talking about it. And then the president is. And I'm going to be honest with you. I thought it was a good look for every single one of them that was there. And I listened to maybe not every single minute of all of their speeches, but I listened to quite a bit of it, actually, Phil. And I'll be honest with you, every single one of those guys I just mentioned gave a good, solid speech. to include the president. I mean, he talked about it. He had, several call outs for Portman and certainly for Mitch McConnell. Those are, there's plenty of clips out there, what he had to say. But I mean, he did. He went on to talk about it. I also found it was interesting, Phil, when Rob Portman was talking about this issue, he made mention of how he had actually started trying to work this issue back when he was a representative in like 1993. And I guess he's actually kind of from that Cincinnati area. So he talked about having worked on it all these years. And one of the things Senator Portman said was, he's like, you know what? He goes, yeah, we put a lot of time and effort into it, and we just never could get it done. We finally got federal support. He thanked the president for it. I mean, at the end of the day, it was just a good look, and this bipartisan infrastructure bill, I think, is going to do good things around the country, and we saw it the other day in Kentucky.
I will say, too, this bridge is, I mean, if you know anything about politics, you're going to know something about this bridge, because this bridge has been the site of multiple political appearances over the last, probably 15 to 20 years. I mean, this is a popular place for politicians to go stand in front of this bridge and say, look, this is why American infrastructure is failing. I mean, President Trump specifically mentioned this bridge. President Obama made an appearance at the bridge during his term trying to get, money for infrastructure. So not just the bridge itself, which I get is hugely important, but the symbolism of what this bridge means to the country and our infrastructure is massive. Simultaneously, while this is going on, the VP, the Secretary of Transportation, various other bipartisan senators, congressmen, and governors are appearing at several other states around the country, right? There was an appearance at the Gold Star Bridge in Connecticut, Cam, one that I think you and I are both intimately familiar with. And then another bridge, I think in Ohio that same day, but I could be wrong. It may have been in a different state.
One of the things Senator McConnell talked about at the bridge, too, was he said, I know things get nasty when we're running for office and all that, and we sling mud. But he said, I've always liked to believe that once we're elected and we're in our jobs, we need to try and find ways to just flat out get things done. And, and he said, and that oftentimes means trying to reach across the aisle and shake hands, et cetera. And so, it's funny. McConnell is out there talking about getting along with people and trying to work on things and such and all that, while you read what the former president was saying about him, I guess, and his wife and running the guy down. And here's McConnell out there, just flat out getting things done, basically ignoring what he had to say about it. I think the president's calling him the old crow now, but you know what? McConnell seems to be ignoring him. Good on him. He's at a bridge getting things done.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it just goes back to, it's the new year. So a lot of policies that were started in the last year and signed into law in the last year are now going into effect. So some of the other ones include, we talked about the infrastructure thing. This is the beginning of many infrastructure projects around the country. We've also got some things from the Inflation Reduction Act. So specifically, this year, people on Medicare and Medicaid, their prescription drugs will be capped at $2,000. Huge momentum for less inexpensive health care, especially for people who are in need. Additionally, on the healthcare notes, one of the big things that I think is really interesting and really good for the country is that they are no longer going to allow drug companies to raise the prices of their drugs faster than the rate of inflation. Which is good. I see you giving me the sign that, you don't think that's a good deal, but I think it is, especially when you consider, I have relatives who are very allergic to certain things that you would encounter in normal day-to-day stuff, and they need to carry an EpiPen. And sometimes EpiPens, at one point, the price of an EpiPen was raised artificially to $2,000 a piece.
I mean, it's not that I think it's bad. I just don't know. I don't know enough about this Inflation Reduction Act to really know how it's going to roll out and benefit. And I know we're in the new year now. There's been a lot of hype about it from one side of the aisle and one side of the aisle only. So I need to see more, and I need to see it actually take effect. If this stuff, if half of what the Democrats are saying in this Inflation Reduction Act takes effect and actually does something, yeah, there could be good things in there, but it seems like a lot of talk from one side of the aisle and zero support on the other. And again, I need to wait and see on the Inflation Reduction Act on that one. I mean, if it benefits people and it lowers prescription drug costs, I think everyone in the country would like to see that. I just don't know enough about it, and I've seen so much resistance that I got to wait and see how this one plays out.
Yeah. So, but on top of that, I mean, there's several other things. So we can talk about the CHIPS and Science Act. The funding is rolling out, which is a good thing. So we've got everything from subsidies to manufacturing plants and manufacturing companies to bring microchip building and technology production back home. That way, things like solar panels and things like the chips that run your cars are actually going to start getting produced back in the U.S. of A., as well as funding in schools to increase STEM or science, technology, engineering, and math education in our public schools. All of which I think those things are really good.
So the CHIPS Act, right? That was a bipartisan act, kind of like the infrastructure thing. So there was a number of Republicans and Democrats worked together on that, both the House and the Senate, to get traction there. The only thing is, I'm with you in that I like, the end result of this. It will take some time, though, I think, to be fair, to get these chips manufactured in the country. So I think that will take a little bit of time. But as you mentioned, right, the ball is now rolling and there's funding going this way. So, you know what? Even if it takes a couple of years to get these chips made here, at the end of the day, that's good news for us, right? To not have to be relying on China and other foreign sources to get these chips. So I'm with you. I mean, it's good. It's good to see these things taking effect.
I read a thing the other day too, though, that did say that the best thing about this is that it wasn't so long ago that we removed some of those technology manufacturing processes. So there is already some infrastructure in the country available. So I think that's a good thing. That maybe we'll see it a little bit quicker because of that. But again, these things are kind of trickle through legislation that it's going to take some time for us to really see it, right? Kids are not going to be smarter after the first week of school in the new year because of this STEM, education funding. But it will take time, but we're going to see it generationally as we move forward, which is a really good thing.
Yeah.
Some action in the Senate, Cam. You want to talk about Josh Hawley having some opposition?
He does, right? Or it looks like he's going to, I should say. So got a guy here who actually is kind of familiar to you and I, Phil, this guy named Lucas Kuntz. And I say kind of familiar because back in some of our, earlier episodes last year, we were talking about him running or had his name in the hat for Missouri Senate seat, the one that was being vacated by Roy Blunt. And so he didn't even make his way out of the primary there. But he's thrown his name in the hat again now for the Josh Hawley seat, which is going to be up in 2024. Just to kind of refresh our listeners a little bit on this Kuntz guy, Marine veteran, was came from kind of a tough background. Talks about how that shaped him a lot. Didn't have a lot of money growing up, saw his family kind of struggle. Says he's a populist, right? I've read through a lot of his policies and stances. Seems to be a pretty liberal guy. I'll be honest with you. I mean, yeah, this is making some news at the end of the day, but I mean, Missouri is still a red state. Now, I say that, right? I think there are some pockets of blue there, probably in the St. Louis area, certainly, and probably Kansas City as well, and kind of the Kansas City suburbs. Maybe a little bit
Columbia,
around,
probably where the college
maybe
is.
Columbia, probably. Maybe a little bit around Jefferson City, the capital. But the bulk of Missouri is a pretty red state, right? And so it's interesting. I was kind of thinking about this earlier, and when I was reading about this one, and people are, already saying, well, Hawley's controversial, kind of like Ted Cruz, and look how Ted Cruz got challenged the last time he ran. But I think there are some differences here as well. I will give you credit, Phil, how you have mentioned and oftentimes say it to me both on the podcast and in private conversation that you think Texas is going blue. And I will say that I do think you are correct in that Texas has moved not all the way blue, but has been trending, especially parts of Texas, maybe a little more blue. So, and Beto O'Rourke, that challenger for Cruz, had name brand recognition. Lucas Kuntz doesn't have the name brand recognition Beto O'Rourke does, and I'm sorry, I do not see Missouri moving blue like Texas may be doing. And so he's making some news. He's putting his name out there. We kind of know him a little bit from the past. And you know what? To be fair, I mean, if he gets through the primary, maybe he makes a little bit of noise and challenges Holly a little bit. But Phil, I don't think there's any way Josh Hawley loses this seat in Ruby Red, Missouri. Do you? At the end of the day,
I don't think it's going to turn blue, but I could see Josh Hawley losing potentially in a primary or something.
oh,
I mean, he has gotten a pretty bad rap. I mean, you don't have to, this day and age, right? People don't get into politics the way you and I do. And you don't have to really get down to the nuts and bolts of somebody's views or what they're going to do to talk to the voter, right? So as minor as it is, the video and all the stuff mocking Josh Hawley for running away from the Capitol or, running away from the Senate chambers on January 6th has more of an impact than you would think, than somebody that's really just sitting down. That video of him running has more impact than a debate probably does in his case. And so I don't know that it's going to turn blue, but I think that he could face a primary challenge now.
okay. Well, it is funny that you mentioned that video of him running away, because that was one of the things Kuntz talked about the other day when he announced his getting or throwing his name in the ring, if you will. He did say, he talked about how Josh Hawley was running on January 6th and, the infamous video you mentioned, and how, he would never have been able to do that when he was in Iraq and Afghanistan and the areas that he served in the Marine Corps. So he's already kind of using that, throwing it out there. I did not really think much about a primary challenger for Josh Hawley, although he could see one. Phil, maybe Eric Greitens gets back in the ring.
Yeah, hopefully not for various reasons. But I will say it's amazing, Cam, because it seems like a generation ago when we were talking about this Missouri primary, right? I mean, that seems like so long ago, and really, we haven't even been doing this show for a year. It's crazy.
And I think I figured I'd put a smile on your face when I managed to fit Eric Greitens back in yet another episode.
the rhino hunter himself, yeah.
Maybe he'll be hunting again. But yeah, I was gonna say though, Phil, sticking with the Senate, I was gonna move to another issue here real quick, and that is a longtime senator, Debbie Stabenow, is retiring up there. She holds a seat in Michigan. Going to retire in 2024. This woman's had that seat since 2001, so she's been a long time senator up there. Saying she's done, and I mean, hey, you've been in the Senate that many years. I mean, I don't blame her. Republicans think they can flip that seat up there. Phil, I'm seeing a number of Democrats already, like Alyssa Slotkin, Debbie Dingell, saying they're considering throwing their name in there. We talked earlier about Phil about how Missouri's probably not flipping, but Michigan is a that is kind of a swing state. So I mean, there's a chance. I mean, Phil, chance Republicans flip that up there, or you think that stays Democrat? I mean, I know this is a ways off, but
if we look at the trends, Michigan has, while it is very contested swing state, it is less contested now. I mean, it has been shifting and trending blue since 2016, right? 2016. It goes red, right? Goes for Trump. But every election since then, 2018, 2020, not to mention, right? I mean, they just elected a very controversial Democratic governor, reelected, Gretchen Whitmer. And I mean, she was on the news, on the national news, because she was hated so much by people in her own state, and they elected her. So I think that we're trending blue with this one. I don't think that Senate seat is going to go red. Again, I could be wrong. We see crazier things like Sherrod Brown in Ohio. There's always some kind of outlier that happens. So at the end of the day, if they get a good candidate in there, it will stay blue, is my prediction.
Yeah, well, candidate quality matters, right? I mean, you mentioned earlier, you talked about that governor race. Gretchen Whitmer did win and won it pretty easily. Let's not forget, though, she was running against a really controversial candidate. I mean, we talked about that race some months ago, but Tudor Dixon, that lady she was pretty controversial. So, back to Mitch McConnell and his words, candidate quality does matter. So some of that we'll have to see, but I mean, ultimately, again, it's a couple of years down the road before this race even matures. But nevertheless, I think it is news that the senator is retiring. Senator Stabenow is retiring up there. So, definitely news there. But you know what, Phil, with all that being said, there was a lot of news this week in the House. specifically revolving around the speaker issues and trying to get trying to get a speaker, which we do finally have one. But yeah, 15 different tries there, Phil. So what do you got on the news this week there from the House?
Well, first I wanted to just start with, we get feedback like this where people want us to kind of explain things. So I think before we enter, I'm sure most people by now have heard that something was going on all week long in the House. But let's talk just a little bit about what the Speaker of the House is and what the Speaker of the House does. Because I think even you or I, as political nerds, have actually learned some things, about this position that we didn't probably know until this week, right? There was a lot of unknown ground that we traveled, as a country and in the political nerd world this week, as we're kind of learning how these things work. So I think the most important thing to be said out there about the Speaker of the House is it is the third in line for president. That's probably the biggest takeaway, So if something were to happen to the president and the vice president, while highly unlikely, the Speaker of the House is that person. Now, unlike the Senate, which is led by the vice president, or just simply kind of run by the majority and the senior person in the majority in the Senate, the House is a little bit different. The House is done by more of a democratic process, right? So, every 2 years, we have an election. Every single House member is up for election because they only serve 2 years, and then they go in representing their specific district in a specific state. And sometimes there are non-voting House members that represent the likes of Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. and other territories. But they go in, and then the first course of action is they have to elect who the speaker is going to be. So obviously, if you just do the numbers, it's almost always somebody from if not always somebody from the majority party, which now is the Republicans, 222 to 212. And so the first order of business is to do that. Some other notable things about the Speaker of the House is that they basically govern the rules of the House, which are unique to the specific 2-year period that they are in. So one of the things they have to do early on is establish rules. They establish what gets voted on, what gets brought to the floor. So they are kind of the gatekeeper for the business that's conducted in the House. So largely important. Cam, do you have anything to add to that or something I may have missed?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much nailed it. I mean, you're right when you said that the speaker, it is, it always becomes somebody out of the majority or, ruling majority, if you will, there, but the majority party. But there is one other thing I will add. There is nothing in writing that says the Speaker of the House has to be a member of the House. It could technically be somebody else. And we saw some other people nominated this week, namely Donald Trump. So, we saw several different people get nominated. And again, like you said, the former president not being a member of the House. I will finally say that other than being the gatekeeper to the legislation that is brought to the floor, one of the biggest things that's kind of intrinsic to the job is that they are in charge of gathering votes, holding the votes, and getting the votes on the floor for said legislation that comes in front of the House. And so in this particular case, Kevin McCarthy, the assumed new Speaker of the House, failed in doing that for 14 times. And it's a stark comparison. While the rules and the situations are going to be quite different, it should be noted that, like her or hate her, whatever the case is, Nancy Pelosi never once brought a vote to the floor that did not pass. And you can contrast that however you want, but Kevin McCarthy already has 14 of them. And when you really think about it, he almost has 15 because he didn't coalesce those other votes. They just voted present, which is a non-vote. Well, here's what I'll say. I'm not going to contrast or push back necessarily on Pelosi. I just call that being a good politician. And I mean, at the end of the day, these people are, whether we like them or not, if you've been around the House or the Senate for that matter for a number of years, you got to be a shrewd politician. And I'll never take that from Pelosi. I mean, I think she is a shrewd politician, right? And she knew what she was doing as a speaker. look, there's been a lot of successful speakers of the House going back many, many years. This is not common what we saw this past week. I mean, it had been 100 years since we'd even had a speaker vote take, more than one vote, right? I mean, this is just what we were used to, right? Is the House starts, they elect their speaker, whether that was Pelosi and, going in the past, John Boehner, and we could go back and forth, whatever. But these people were getting elected right out the gate. Well, wasn't the case this week. You had a holdout group of Republicans, House members or House member elects at the time that were dug in and not going to go Kevin McCarthy. In fact, there was 5 or 6 of them had dubbed themselves the Never Kevin movement. And so, as much as McCarthy wanted this thing, he knew, had to have known going into this that he was going to have a fight on his hands. And he had the majority of Republicans behind him from the get-go, as you mentioned, Phil. It was this holdout group, this, about 10% of the caucus that just wasn't for him. And there were various reasons why they weren't for him. Some of them just seemed to be holding out to hold out. Others held out and were pretty upfront about why they held out and that they were holding out for some rule changes. And whether people like the rule changes or not, I think when you at least explain your position and explain this is why I'm holding out because I'm trying to make a change, I think that softens the blow a little bit. I think probably the biggest one that comes to mind was Chip Roy. He got a lot of attention this past week for standing out and holding out early on, saying, well, I'm doing this because I want some procedural changes, namely being on the big spending bills. He wants 72 hours to review them, amongst some other things. Again, you may totally disagree with Chip Roy or maybe don't care for his politics, but I think you would agree that at least when someone is explaining why they maybe are a no vote, it helps people better understand him a little bit more than just someone who says, yeah, no, I'm not voting for you at all.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I don't like Chip Roy at all, but I don't think that his principle on that is all that far off of what most Americans would be happy with, right? In order to have a big spending bill, maybe it should not just get crammed through at midnight the night before a deadline. I kind of agree with that. I don't see anything wrong with that. Again, I don't like the guy at all, but I will say that he looks a lot better than, Lauren Boebert, who even went as far as to go on MSNBC, which is insane, right? That's our people who don't maybe consume the amount of news that we do. To see somebody that is that far right go on MSNBC legitimately and try and get her point across, which turns out she had no point. And that's part of the problem, is that the Matt Gaetzes, the Lauren Boeberts, and then some of the other holdouts in this group were not able to talk about what their demands were to the public or effectively really to the people in the House, because they didn't know. They kept bringing this thing to a vote. I don't know if McCarthy thought that was strategically good, but I think in the long run it was bad, because we saw on Monday they have 3 votes. He actually lost more votes on Monday. He started out, I think, with only 19 defectors, which was I thought at the beginning there was going to be at most a dozen. I thought it was going to be somewhere between 5 and 12. 19 was mind-blowing, but as the votes went on that day, it got down to 20, and then eventually 21. We have 3 more votes on Tuesday. I mean, at this point, I'm worried that this is a sign that these 5 holdouts, or even maybe the 20, or even maybe a larger amount, may end up being significantly more powerful in the new House, which could be very dangerous to the Republican Party. And I'll tell you what, the Republicans in the House, I get it. The whole House doesn't always look that great because it's kind of a shit show compared to the Senate. But the Republicans in the House did not look good this week. Those were not good optics.
I will agree with you to an extent there, Phil, on a couple of your points. First one I'm going to get to is your concern you mentioned about, these 15 to 20 people holding, kind of the party at ransom, if you will, or for ransom. I have actually heard that there are some moderate Republicans that may not publicly be saying it, but are, in the back of their minds a little bit nervous also, right? Because let's not forget, you and I have talked about this before, right? That Freedom Caucus is 30 some members or whatever. the Freedom Caucus, for our listeners being that far right group, many of these holdouts were part of that Freedom Caucus. While the Main Street Republican, the more moderate or middle of the road Republicans, that caucus is 80 or 90 some members. So, the moderates do outnumber the far righters. But again, Phil, there are some that are concerned about that. And I will also say this, right? You mentioned about the optics of it. Well, I will agree with you. It was not a great looking week for Republicans. There was a lot of frustration.
You say frustration, but we talk about like the infighting. I mean, these guys are like, Matt Gaetz was on the news every single day, 4 days in a row, right? Making public appearances, trashing House Republicans, right? And then you've got other House Republicans. I mean, you talk about Chip Roy, right? He was a little bit more, you want to say like proper, or, had a little bit more dignity in front of the camera. Yeah. And, even we talked the other day about, our favorite senator with the eye patch from Texas, right, was on there, too, making a lot of good points, kind of saying that they're going to hold out. And these are just a couple of names. I mean, there were people that I've never once seen in a political news interview that were in front of the camera, because it was kind of a free-for-all. People were walking in and out of the chamber and getting caught by reporters, so it was whoever they could get their hands on.
Yeah, well, some of them were people we didn't know. To be fair, though, Phil, you mentioned our favorite guy with the eye patch. That is Dan Crenshaw for our listeners. And you said senator. To be fair, he is a representative. Although maybe down the road, maybe down the road, Mr. Crenshaw has aspirations for the Senate or not. But Phil, I didn't see the interview. You said you saw him on Fox News. I think Neil Cavuto was interviewing him. I think you told me Crenshaw was pretty frustrated in that interview, was he not?
He was, but he just basically said, the stance is we're going to keep doing this. But like I said, they kept doing it, and it only highlighted, you have people out there jeering Matt Gaetz on the floor. The Democrats are making a huge spectacle of the fact that the Republicans can't get their act together. They're like taking excessive time to vote and, making excessive comments. And like, I felt like Representative Aguilar had 15 completely different, completely unique speeches of why they wanted Hakeem Jeffries to do. And it just gave them more room to talk and message to their their constituents about how good of a job they've been doing.
Yeah, but at the end of the
like
day,
I said, it just gave them more time to message, because the Republicans are dragging out a shit show on behalf of their own.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the Democrats can message all they want, but the country voted Republicans in the House for the majority. And so and now it's their turn, right? Now you got in there, right? You brought a message people got on board with, right? They voted you in there. Now you got to govern. And that's what they've got to do. And McCarthy, at the end of the day, he is the speaker. Now, it took a lot to get him there, Phil. You mentioned 15 tries. You talked about kind of all the stuff that was going on. Yeah, there was drama through the week, but I think really the big drama came Friday night, or biggest drama, maybe I should say, going into that 14th and 15th vote. I mean, on the 14th vote, I was sitting there watching it, and that was the one, right, that the Republicans had been saying, we're going to go in there and win on this one. I mean, McCarthy thought he had it. He strolled in there with a smile on his face, and everything was going to go and blah, blah, blah. And then the votes started happening. And you heard, Gaetz didn't vote for him. And that was the shocker, right? And Matt Rosendale out of Montana, he came in and did not vote for him. That was another one he thought he was going to have. And all this, goes down. And at the end of the day, he's like a vote short, or two. I think it was 1 or 2 votes that he was short of on that 14th one. And you can just sense the tension there. And that's when now we have the Mike Rogers, the guy that goes actually up and starts, I don't want to say charging Matt Gaetz, but he goes up there and kind of confronts him. Now, Phil, you and I talked about the news kind of made, I think, more out of that than it was. I don't think Rogers was like trying to kill the guy, but nevertheless, and he's got another guy, Rich Hudson, this other representative out of North Carolina, has to get in between him and pulls Rogers back. And so there's all that drama going on.
By his face, right?
Yeah, by his face. Yeah. By his face, and then, Phil, I was talking about
keep in mind, this is, I was watching this live, and that confrontation right there came immediately after a heated conversation. So McCarthy had walked up to Matt Gaetz, and you could see him finger pointing, kind of getting close to each other. There were people that were getting in Matt Gaetz's face, like getting uncomfortably close to him. And that was kind of the last straw, I think. I think that's why the media is making a bigger deal out of it. Of course, they want to, exacerbate everything that happens, but that was not the only heated exchange there that had happened after that 14th vote closed.
I was going to say one more thing on the whole Mike Rogers thing. He even had one of his other constituents, another Republican, accused the guy of being drunk on the floor. This was a guy, Tim Burkett, out of Tennessee, who said, and I quote, "People shouldn't be drinking, especially when you're a redneck on the House floor," end quote. That is, again, on Mike Rogers, the guy who went after Matt Gaetz last night. So there's even some allegations out there that he was possibly a little liquored up. I don't know. Maybe he was just frustrated and went to his office and took a couple shots or had a couple of beers. He'd probably had a rough week. I don't know. Yeah,
I was going to say it was a rough week. I mean,
well, maybe he was sitting down with some Jack Daniels to console himself. I don't know, but I'm with you, Phil. At the end of the day, I don't think it was like a true fight. The media kind of made a big deal out of it, but regardless, tensions were there. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Donald Trump is calling in, and now all of a sudden Matt Gaetz and Boebert decide to flip, and there's all this drama, and out of nowhere McCarthy and a bunch of Republicans call to not, they pull back or rescind their motion to adjourn, and so we get this 15th vote, and then he gets it. McCarthy gets it on the 15th vote. I went to sleep at that point. I mean, once I saw that he was going to get it, I went to sleep. It was a little earlier where you're at, Phil, so I think you watched, kind of the whole vote pan out. But
yeah, we watched the whole thing, and I stopped. I watched both, speeches from, Hakeem Jeffries and Kevin McCarthy, and then that's when I pulled the plug. But a couple of other things I want to mention before we get further along is that, Trump had gotten involved with this thing on Monday. And it just shows that his influence and power within the party is no longer there. He had basically said that he reached out to everybody and they were all going to be good. And then we wake up Tuesday morning, the vote fails again. All three of them held on Tuesday. And Tuesday afternoon, I heard an interview with James Carville, the Ragin' Cajun. And, he had two things to say. The first thing was congratulations to Tulane on their bowl game, which I wholeheartedly agree about. The second thing that he said was that at this point, Republicans have pulled the pin, but forgot that they needed to throw the grenade.
I'm smiling, Phil, because I think I heard that exact interview with old Jim Carville also on. Was that one on MSNBC? I think.
Yeah, it was. I think it was on. Ari Melber, whatever his show is. But either way, I mean. Yeah, his point was spot on, especially with the atmosphere on Tuesday. That he's right. They forgot that after you pull the pin, you got to throw the grenade, and they didn't do it. Who loses out more in this one? Does Matt Gaetz and the Freedom Caucus loyalists around him lose more, or does McCarthy lose more in this?
Tough question. Well, I'll be honest with you. I think they both got damaged. And maybe that's kind of me being political answering it that way, but I do. I think that whole group got damaged. I think the whole country was looking at Matt Gaetz, not just the Republicans in the House, but I think the whole country, everybody watching on the news or C-SPAN or whatever, was looking at Matt Gaetz, the last couple of nights, thinking, what do you want? I mean, to be fair, a number of these other people that had held out, once Friday came around and they had apparently had late night meetings with McCarthy and his supporters on Thursday, once that all boiled down, they pulled away and started voting for it. To be fair, right? That was 14 of them or whatever. But you had these other 5 or 6 that just wouldn't budge. And I think a lot of people were wondering what they wanted. So I think that was a bad look for the Lauren Boeberts and the Matt Gaetzes. Some of the other holdouts, Matt Rosendale out of Montana, his name was kicked around a little bit. He was digging in his heels. I will say this, though. I think he's got to be careful, and I say that because I'm hearing Rosendale is trying to throw it, or is potentially throwing his name in the hat for the Senate seat in Montana, so possibly going up against John Tester in 2024. Rosendale's got to be thinking kind of national, statewide things, so he's got to watch it, I guess. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think they all got damaged, Phil. I think McCarthy got damaged. I think people around the country looked at him and yeah, I think they felt some damage there. There were some winners out of this, and I think you disagreed with me a little bit on this, and that's okay. But I think Chip Roy was a winner, and I don't just mean because he held out and got stuff he wanted. I think he got a bunch of airtime, and I think he is kind of now in conservative circles, kind of this new kind of hot topic of the moment. So I think he got some maybe favorable press, but I think McCarthy and the Freedom Group, though, kind of as a whole, took some punches on this one.
Another big winner, you probably disagree with me, but I think a big winner after this whole affair is the House Democrats. I mean, they got excessive time to give speeches and talk about their accomplishments, what they're doing, what they're trying to do, what they've already gotten done in the last 2 years. And then on top of that, again, they got a lot of camera time in front of the news channels, talking about different things, and also having the opportunity to say, hey, look over there, look how chaotic that is. It really makes an impact. I think it helps them a little bit, maybe not as much as it helps Chip Roy, because I don't think anybody really cared about that guy before. Regardless, I mean, at this point, McCarthy is feckless, and so McCarthy is not going to be able to do anything. He's going to be in a perpetual day-by-day job interview because of this concession that was made, that any one member of the majority of the party can call an election on his speakership any given day. And he's really not going to be able to do anything. And now this extreme section of the party is going to try and hold him hostage on every single vote. I mean, he may have trouble naming post offices at this point, Cam.
Well, to be fair, right, that whole motion of one member to call a vote to oust the speaker, that was House rules forever and a day up until 2016, I think. So, I mean,
but those were different times, Cam.
Well, okay, but let's be fair. That's I want to be fair. That has been was a long-standing rule in the House. Nancy Pelosi got it changed because she saw what had happened to John Boehner and Paul Ryan, and so she wanted to get that changed. But again, going back to this stuff, yeah, I mean, McCarthy's you mentioned the challenges he's going to have. You touched on Chip Roy. I'll make a quick prediction. I think that guy is probably in line to someday be a senator in Texas, possibly even the governor there. I just think we've not heard the last of him. I think he's gaining a lot of momentum. You may disagree with me on that, Phil, but I think he has picked up momentum there.
I just don't. I don't disagree, but I don't know and I don't care. I think it's important to point out though that because I think you're going to ask me the question, and I think I know what the question is, but I want to make the point though that when you talk about you go back to Boehner and Paul Ryan, that was when this Freedom Caucus was still the Tea Party movement, right? From several years ago. And that was kind of what started this whole thing. And at the end of the day, we'll go back to it. We talked about it when we talked about George Santos, but this is the lack of accountability amongst Republicans coming back to haunt them. Because a lot of these people, if they would just hold them accountable for poor behavior, they wouldn't be dealing with them right now. But because they've allowed this, nonconformist, far right-wing element in their party to spin out of control, we're going to see over the next 2 years that the Gateses and the Boeberts and these few people have way more power than they should.
I mean, you say hold them in line, but I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff that they've been doing over the years, the Freedom Caucus, just because you're in the Freedom Caucus doesn't mean you're out of line and need discipline. I mean, you can flip that right back at Democrats and talk about their progressive left wing that is very, very far left also. And, but just because they hold the far left views doesn't mean the Democrats have to discipline them. So,
in all fairness, you're right, because what Democratic congressman was, investigated for child sex trafficking? Matt Gaetz was. He's not a Democrat. None of the squad members were being investigated for child sex trafficking, right?
Okay. Guess what? That's splitting brass tacks. And you know what? To be fair to Representative Gaetz, you keep bringing this up. He has not been charged with a crime. So
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
He again, we can go round and round on this. There's been a lot of garbage on both sides of the aisle and different congressmen, politicians over the years. That's probably a road best not to go down. You talk about the accountability piece.
I mean, I'm fine going down that road. I mean, I just feel like it majority of it comes from one side. Yeah, both sides have made some mistakes, but a majority of the criminals out there.
I strongly disagree with you. I mean, to say criminals, I mean, again, Congressman Gates has not been charged with a crime. So
you don't have to be. Al Franken was never charged with a crime.
I mean,
and he was forced out of there.
Well, he decided to resign.
He was forced out of the Senate. Yeah, but he didn't decide to without pressure. I mean, he succumbed to the pressure of his own party.
Again, we can spin our wheels round and round on this. At the end of the day,
the Republicans in the House are reaping what they sowed.
You may feel that way. Here's what I want to see. I want to see them go ahead and govern. The country has decided they want Republicans in charge of the House, and that's what happened. By a slim margin, maybe, yes, but nevertheless, they've got it. Now they need to govern, and that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say this to McCarthy and to the other Republicans. The ball is in your court. Govern. And will they? Many of them are going to try. Will they get much done? No, because you know what? At the end of the day, it's probably going to be a lot of partisan gridlock, because let's not forget, while the Republicans have the House, the Democrats still have the Senate. The president, obviously, still a Democrat. So it's going to be, honestly, I think 2 years of gridlock. I think there will be some things getting done, and it's probably going to come from the moderates pushing it in the House, right? The problem solvers and some of those. But I think it'll be interesting. But Phil, I want to ask you this before we move on. Does Kevin McCarthy complete his 2-year tour as Speaker?
I kind of want to say he does, but there's a part of me that wants to be bold and say that he doesn't. I think I'm going to go with no.
No, as in no, he's not going to finish?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with no, but just because I think he's going to, actually. I think he's going to finish, but I would love for it just to be chaos and the Republicans melt themselves. But I think he'll finish. I think he'll get his, he's going to get his painting hung on the wall. There's the Speaker of the House, and I think he gets through it. Do I think it's going to be easy? No. Do I think he is going to be politically ruined afterwards? Yes. I think that he is already partially politically ruined. I think he makes it 2 years and his career's over.
Okay. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, this is the moment he's been waiting for. So, I mean, I don't think he's got aspirations to go any higher. I mean, he is in California, so highly unlikely he would go anywhere if he would try and run for a Senate seat in California, because, I mean, that's a pretty blue state. However, he is in a red district of California, that area around Bakersfield. So I think he's kind of found his sweet spot. I think he's gotten to where he wants to go. I think he makes it through, but I think it's going to be a rocky one there. Bill, I will say that. I do think it's going to be rocky. But nevertheless, we do have a Speaker of the House now, albeit it took 15 tries. And the House has been sworn in. They're going to vote, I think, on their rules package on Monday, I think is kind of what they've got going, or at least what I've been hearing.
How many days do you think that takes?
Well, I've already heard one Republican who said he's not voting for it. That's Tony Gonzalez out of Texas. He was on Twitter the other night. Mr. Gonzalez being a retired Navy guy, and he put something out on Twitter that he was not voting for it. So there's already some fractions there, but we'll see. But they're going to vote on that on Monday. We'll see. Let's see what this House can accomplish. Again, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, you may be happy with some of the things they put out. You may not be, but let's give them their shot. See what they can do. The country put them in there. Speaking of the House, now that we've talked about all that was the drama and such, I did want to put in a quick plug for a House member that I've been following on social media a little bit. And I think, Phil, you've started too, and that's Representative Dusty Johnson out of South Dakota. And I bring him up not to get political with him. People may agree with his political views or may not. Johnson's a Republican. He's kind of a middle of the road guy. He calls himself a pragmatic conservative, and he problem solver caucus guy and such. But the reason I wanted to bring him up and give him a little plug is he does some pretty darn good clips on his social media, video clips, and hats off to his media team, I guess. But he's got some good clips out there where I think he's actually trying to educate people, and I think they're pretty darn interesting to watch. Some of them, don't you think, Phil?
Yeah, he did a really good one. Kind of in the early stages. It was Monday, and he was kind of explaining what was going on with the whiteboard. A strategy he probably adopted from Katie Porter. I have no idea. I'm just saying, she's been famous for a couple of years for using the whiteboard, but he does have some really good content on there. I went and looked at some of his stuff on Instagram, and so I thought it was good. I gave him a follow, not from my personal account, but from the Pocket Politics account. That way I can still see it, but it's not. I don't have a Republican inundated, into my social media feed.
He he it's interesting too because he's kind of one of those guys I think flies under the radar, but now that I've been seeing him and kind of following him on social media and such, here I am seeing him, and all of a sudden out of nowhere I am at home last night. We're sitting there watching the TV, and I had CNN on because I'm just kind of flipping through the channels, kind of looking for coverage, if you will, and all the House drama and such. And out of nowhere, I see like Anderson Cooper interviewing him. And I look up and I'm like, man, that's Dusty Johnson. I actually know this guy, so because so many of the House people we don't know. But yeah, it's good to see him out there. And although, Phil, I think you were making mention that you might want to see him get a couple new ties, right?
Yeah, I will say, because we were talking about this before, and it was funny because after I looked him up, I went and watched a couple of his videos, and there's this orange striped tie that keeps appearing, and then it turned out like the next day, as I'm watching this like house disaster go on, I see him walking around the house floor on the C-SPAN camera in this orange striped tie, and so my one recommendation is use that salary that you get. Some of those, it's tax deductible, Dusty. Okay, it's tax deductible. Go buy yourself some ties.
But keep doing the videos because we like them.
But with that being said, hey, we talked a little bit about the Instagram page. You can follow us on Instagram at p_squared Phil and Cam. Also, we're on Facebook, Pocket Politics with Phil and Cam. You can email us.
CameronandPhil@gmail.com.
And then you can always go to the website, link to all of those things from there, pocketpolitics.co. I hope you have enjoyed another great episode. This is officially season 2. I think we kicked it off with a bang.
Yeah, so with our parting shots here, I guess I'll go first. But before I start with my parting shot, I will just say as well, I thought we had a couple of really good special episodes that we did over the holidays, both the one on FDR and Reagan. Both of them I thought were good. So for our listeners out there that maybe you listened to us, but you took a break over the holidays, I highly recommend you go back and listen to those special episodes because we both put time into researching both of those presidents. Phil and I both learned things about each of them that maybe we didn't know. And I'll be honest with you, I think we both had a lot of fun doing them. Wouldn't you agree, Phil?
Yeah, it was a good time.
All right. Well, for my parting shot tonight, I will say this. Even though we are in the midst of winter and it is, definitely cold out and frozen around the country, it won't be long and spring is going to be here, and spring is a time for gardening. And I have been already looking through some seed catalogs as I do every winter as I get ready for gardening. People that know me know I enjoy gardening. There was also a new study that came out here recently that said gardening can help reduce your risk of cancer and boost your overall mental health. And they found this by people being out in gardens and being active and doing all, everything that it takes to get around. It just makes you feel better overall. By improving that mental health, it helps drop your cancer risk down, etc. I'm not going to read the whole study, but it's been out there, it's been done, and also you get to grow a lot of just good fresh vegetables and fruits and whatnot that you can consume, and it's stuff you've grown yourself, and obviously the health benefits of eating things like that. So
yeah, so I just wanted to add too, when you grow your own fruits and vegetables, they bricks higher. Which Cam, do you bricks any of your fruits and vegetables, or know what that is?
So I do not.
Yeah, so it's a way to test the natural sugars that occur. But basically what that means is that when you grow your own fruits and vegetables, they are going to taste significantly better than the stuff you buy in the grocery store. So that's another plug for the gardening. Thanks, Cam. I was going to talk about Damar Hamlin this week. So Damar Hamlin is a safety defensive player for the Buffalo Bills. And this week he had a collapse on field after a tackle. It looked pretty bad. You can see him as he stands up from the tackle, immediately falls back. Just the way he landed and the way his hands were, I knew something was seriously bad. It was pretty rough couple of days, but it looks like he is recovering at a pretty successful rate now. And so good on him. Good for him and his family. You know, our thoughts and prayers are with him, and I hope that he comes back to a full recovery.
Yeah, you mentioned Phil that he is doing better. I think he's now speaking today. They were talking about he's able to speak, and it looks like, right, he is, you know, well on his way to recovery. I mean, fingers crossed, obviously, but that was really a shocking thing to see. I mean, I was watching that game on Monday night. And it was like, man, what just happened? You know, it was something that I'd never seen before watching a football game. I mean, I've seen many guys get injured, but I mean, to see that somebody actually go into cardiac arrest and CPR have to be performed and the ambulance is out there. I mean, that was just a really bizarre thing on Monday night.
Yeah, and you know the other thing too is that, you know, for them to cancel the game, you know that something's significantly wrong too, because that very rarely happens. Players get injured all the time, come off in stretchers, even sometimes ambulances, and they don't cancel the game. But that's kind of when I think everybody knew it was getting really, really serious. You know, I will say, you said you'd never seen anything like that before. So a couple of years ago in the Euros, which is a big soccer tournament over in Europe, there was a soccer player that essentially did the same thing. He didn't really get hit that way, but he just had a sudden cardiac arrest and just collapsed on the middle of the field. And I will say the one thing that I believe is hopeful for Damar Hamlin is that player, Christian Eriksen, they said initially he would never play professional sports again, and he currently plays with Manchester United, one of the biggest soccer franchises in the world. So he took him a couple years, but he eventually got his recovery back to the point where he is playing professional level at the highest possible level over there in England.
Okay, well, let's hope Mr. Hamlin can make a similar recovery as well. So, with all that being said, that looks like that wraps our show up this week. It's been fun. It's been another good episode. I think a lot of good things discussed here tonight. So, again, thank you everybody for listening, and until next time.
Right, bye.